Any other questions? Should we start now? Go ahead, yeah, Abdul.
Professor.
Is my screen visible to all?
I see it. Yes, I mean, is everybody? Does everybody see it too?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
go
Thank you,
ahead,
sir.
please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, most compassionate, most merciful. My today's presentation is about consumer theory and producer theory. So, first of all, we have to understand the two factors, exogenous and endogenous, that affect consumer behavior. Exogenous factors are those factors that affect the plans and ideas of consumer from outside the market and determine his or her choice in broad terms. Exogenous factors that influence consumer behavior are those factors that exist in the mind of consumer before he or she encounters the offers of supplier in the market. So exogenous factors include the size of
Now,
wealth.
this here, what Abdul Basit put Kahf reference all the time. This is a bribe for me, but it doesn't affect really. And these bribes, I don't buy them. It does not increase, yeah, Abdul Basit, your grade by getting me as a reference.
No, sir, I actually took material from your book, Notes of
Okay,
Islamic Finance. So, as honesty, I quoted you.
okay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So, the factors include the size of wealth, disposable income, and the degree of their liquidity, the level of technology, the biological and material surrounding, and the amount, nature, and cost of information. Value loaded factors include taste, belief, religion, legal system, political framework, culture, social norms, and traditions. For example, if a consumer is a nationalist, he will buy his country's goods. If a consumer is a Muslim, he will buy halal foods. He will avoid buying non-halal food.
Yeah,
So,
but
and
what are halal food? So meat that is slaughtered in America is halal food because it is slaughtered actually according to Sharia, although it is not mentioned on it the name of Allah when it is slaughtered. So it is halal according to a strong opinion that is well known in our classical fiqh. Shafi'i and Hanbali schools argue that mentioning the name of Allah is not an obligatory requirement. And they argue that the food of Christian and Jews, Ahl al-Kitab, is permissible, and meaning by the food here, the meat itself. And you cannot ask them to mention the name of Allah. But definitely, if they mention the name of other than Allah, it may not be acceptable and may not be permissible for us to eat it. But if they don't mention anything, so that is not really a deal. So halal food shouldn't be taken in in the concept of one school of fiqh. As long as it is within the context of Islam is permissible, then that's it. You can't take that halal as like meat that is slaughtered in America according to the law. All the legal requirements, in fact, are exactly the Sharia. I would say, as if that law was made by a Muslim. Was not made by a Muslim, definitely, but it is the exact requirement in Sharia are there, except, of course, for mentioning the name of Allah. Okay, so and take the word halal food easily without difficulty. Okay.
so endogenous factors are those factors that affect the plans, ideas of consumer from inside the market. These factors contribute to reformulating and adjusting consumers' plans and to reaching final decision on his or her demand in the market. So these endogenous factors include the quantities and price of the different commodities in the market, the substitution and complementary goods also affect the consumer behavior. Expected rate of return on investment also affects the consumer.
So why do you add expected return of on investment?
So because sir, it was also in your book. So secondly, if there is a reasonable return on investment, so consumer will spend less money on consumption. He will try to invest for return.
So they will revise, in other words, their original plan and look at it. Now, if we discuss from these same factors, endogenous and exogenous, and the exogenous factors, whether they are value loaded or almost value neutral, all these are mentioned also in the conventional theory. So what do we add to that conventional theory? Rate of return on investment is not mentioned almost at all in the consumption theory, and they always took saving as residual, not really as a factors that is affected by the rate of return in that you find in the market. And it is very fair to say that this point is raised by some Muslim writers or Islamic writers who wrote on Islamic economics. So this is then an important addition, I should say. But also the three-dimension distribution of whatever that is available in the theory of consumption, whether for consumption or for investment or saving, rather, saving investment, or for charity. This three-dimensional is not considered in the conventional theory. In conventional theory, they always consider charity within the within consumption, and without even caring about giving it a special attention. Yet it does have really a special attention, and people, Muslim and non-Muslim, consider it in their analysis, in the use of their income. And this comes again from Islamic analysis. So probably a third element also is important here, that in the almost neutral factors, you mentioned wealth. Wealth is rarely considered in the consumer theory as part. They focus on essentially on income, not on wealth. But when you add wealth, you may add also with it availability of finance, because it does affect consumption between periods, and also the degree of liquidity of the wealth. uh, all these elements affect, of course, the decision of the consumer. So we really are getting kind of improvement on the theory of consumer through the Islamic writers that come really from the analysis of the consumer behavior in a Muslim economy, but need not to be applied only to a Muslim economy, and need not to be applied to Muslims alone. They apply, in fact, to all human beings, because all human beings give donations and give charity contributions, and all human beings also are affected by their wealth and the degree of their wealth, and they are also in fact affected by the rate of return in the market, depending on what is their ability and their desire of investment. So these elements are kind of added element, better, they give better explanation and better understanding of consumer behavior in any society, and regardless in fact also of religion, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. This is a better analysis of the theory of consumer, and gives us a better understanding of it. Okay, especially that when you add that spending on charity need not to be only on consumption goods, it could be also on capital goods, not only consumer goods. Okay.
Okay, sir. Islamic rationalism. The rationalism is one of the most loosely used terms in economics because anything can be rationalized with reference to some relevant set of axioms. The theory of consumer behavior, as developed in the West after the rise of capitalism, is an offspring of the doctrines of economic rationalism and utilitarianism. The,
Okay.
con- the consumer Muslim consumers concept of success lies both for in this world and hereafter. Muslim consumer considers the life of this world and the life of akhirah. Selfishness and altruism. We can understand this with the example of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Abu Bakr gave 100% of his wealth to the charity, and Umar gave 50% of his wealth to the charity. So altruism also affects the Muslim consumers'
but
behavior.
but that really relates to their to their belief in the afterlife, not to the altruism. Where is the altruism in giving to charity 50 or more or less, or yani, where is it? Especially when you say, as you put it as a title here, that is selfishness and altruism. How do you, what is the Islamic theory here? I think you probably need to amend this point. It is not selfishness and altruism. It's rather selfishness through altruism. يعني the
Okay, sir.
Islamic theory and يعني the Quran repeatedly calls on people to maximize their own benefits in the afterlife. But this maximization is selfishness. Of course, you are maximizing your own benefit, whether in this life or in the afterlife. It's your own anyway. And maximizing your own benefit, especially that the Quran repeatedly also talk about these benefits as material benefits, really. يعني in the whole description of Jannah and the joys that are in Jannah are described all the time in the Quran as material uh, joys. Joys of food, clothing, gold and silver all around, and having all your lust implemented. So then this is a call for selfishness, no doubt about it. It's يعني, attracts people by their own desires of getting these kind of things. Uh, Now, how does the altruism play in it? The Islamic view, as I understand it, the altruism plays in it through that when, if you want to maximize your reward in the afterlife, give to others, help others, give people. Through the hadith, for instance, that comes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment will ask a person, tell him that I asked you for food and you did not feed me. So how come the servant will say, you are the Lord, how can I feed you? He said, then Allah would say that my servant so and so asked you for food and you did not give him. If you gave him, you would have found me there. مرضت فلم تعدني. I was sick and you did not visit me. Well, again, a servant so and so was sick and you did not visit him, and so on. So if you want, and this is where the qard hasan to Allah that is mentioned also repeatedly in the Quran. Now, qard hasan to Allah, you give it to whom? Allah doesn't take the qard al-hasan literally. So who gave it? Qard hasan to Allah is charity that is given to the poor and needy and their like of benefits. So this is the idea of uh, uh, selfishness through altruism. That is to maximize your own benefit. You need to be good to others. And the more you are good to others, the more you are maximizing your benefit, even more than when you eat it yourself. When you eat it yourself, you get, say, one joy, one util. Let's take utility. You take one util, but when you give it to others, you may take 700 times. So it is a lot more when you give it to others. So the attraction here is by making being good to others is part of your own selfishness. I am good to others not because I love them. Let's leave loving aside. As one of the companions, when Umar ibn al-Khattab يعني, told him about love something, he said, well, women care about love. I don't care about love. So the idea here is, if you love yourself, if you are so selfish, then be good to others. The more you are good to others, the more you maximize your rewards, and even better than using it yourself. So this is the altruism. It comes uh, like underlining of selfishness. If you are more selfish, you want to maximize your benefit, give to others. That will give you more benefit than even consuming it yourself. So this is the idea here. Okay. So
Okay, sir.
please correct it to make it selfishness through altruism.
Okay, sir. Time horizon of consumer behavior. A Muslim considers life hereafter too for his or her spending. So, Akhira is also time horizon for consumer in Islamic perspective.
Okay.
Wealth belongs to
And
Allah.
that could be the example of Abu Bakr and Umar, and giving more or giving less. When Abu Bakr was asked, what did you leave to your family? He said, I left for them God and his messenger.
Okay, sir. So, wealth belongs to Allah. So, in the Akhira, there will be five questions will be asked out of that. One is, where did you spend your wealth? So, the concept of goods are, all the goods are belongs to Allah, and goods are blessing of Allah. So, Allah
And
made,
also, goods are only what is good and not what is bad. So
yes,
both aspects of it.
that is called tayyibat. So,
Okay.
ethics of consumption. So Muslim consumer spends his money with moderation. He does not spend extravagance and does not waste. his resources. So ethics of thrift too. So Muslim consumer also tries to grow his resources, his rather than spending.
Well, grow their wealth in that sense, rather
Yes.
than spending, grow the wealth rather than spending. So this kind of ethics that is a thrift, but not niggardliness, not being niggard, not being bakhil. The bukhl is very much condemned in Islam, whether for oneself or for others. And at the same time, generosity is praised. Uh, you may add to this respect of the grace of Allah, يعني احترام النعمة, which is part of the Islamic teaching also, that whatever God gives you, that is a grant from God, and you respect it. You don't waste anything of it.
Okay, sir.
So
So
add احترام النعمة.
yes,
Okay.
the maximization process degree of internalization of Islamic rationalism varies. Like in the case of Abu Bakr and Umar, so
Mhm.
internal iman condition of Abu Bakr and Umar was different. So that's why one gave 100% and other gave 50%. Yet Islamic rationalism makes the core separate of consumer behavior in Islamic society. A Muslim is a runner after hasanat all through life. A Muslim gives his best in every work.
Yani
Maxima.
we should notice in the Quran and also in the Sunnah, there are many counting of hasanat, that if you do this 10 times hasana, and coming to prayer in the mosque in a group, the jama'ah, is 27 times than praying alone, and so on. There is a lot of comparison. The Quran also has these kind of comparisons. When it says about charity 700 times, and when it says about in war, that if 1,000 of you, 100 of you may overcome 1,000 if they have perseverance, sabr. And one then it says in the same verse, الآن خفف الله عنكم وعلم أن فيكم ضعفا. So faith plus perseverance, the equation becomes 10 to 1,000, 1 to 10. And faith plus perseverance plus some weakness, maybe weakness in the grouping, weakness or in the heart sometimes. So plus some weakness, then, and here it says ضعفا, means some weakness. So the equation becomes 1 to 2, 100 to 200. And that is in Surah number 8. So the Quran and the Hadith are full of quantifying hasanat, quantifying, counting things, quantifying values, value of so and so, like here, the value of sabr makes 1 to 10, but the value of sabr with some weakness makes 1 to 2, not 1 to 10, and so on. So many of these comparisons in the Quran are there. So really, a matter of counting hasanat. I have a friend. He said, well, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in each step you take, when you go to the mosque, there is a hasana. So I counted on Allah the other day, was going from my home to the mosque. It was 310 steps. So I counted on Allah 310 hasanat. So this mentality is mathematical mentality, which really means, is the mathematical analysis wrong in consumer theory, or it is okay? Now, again, we want to go ahead and we want to discuss the maximization itself, the rationalization of the concept of maximization. Is it acceptable in our Sharia? What do you guys think? Is the concept of maximization acceptable in Sharia?
Yes, sir, I think so.
I believe it is acceptable. In fact, in my opinion, the Quran repeatedly talks about that. Grab as much as you can of the good things, and that is what the Quran always advise. And even the word itself is sometimes mentioned. وفي ذلك فليتنافس المتنافسون. ولو علمتم, in the hadith, if you know the meaning of that verse, that in this reward from God, you should compete on it. In the hadith, if you knew how much reward there is in the first line in the prayer, in the collective prayer in the together, you would have competed on it to the extent that you will make chance who will take it first. So it is a matter of competition in it, in that meaning. لاستهمتم عليه. استهمتم عليه means you take chances and draw who will take the right to be in the first line. Unfortunately, now when we are praying, even here in our mosque, you find many people staying in the second line, and there are spaces in the first line, they don't fill it because they want to stay in the second line. I don't know why. Definitely better. First line is better. Uh, okay. So go ahead, Abdul Basit. Continue, please.
Okay, sir. Are consumers always rational? Answer is no. So there is one quotation in Islam: "You are not believer the moment you commit a major sin." So at that time, that yeah, consumer is not rational. So
So
sometimes,
consumer is not always rational. That's natural, and these came, in fact, in Western studies. This is not an invention by Muslims. That although we talk about rationalism for simplification to generally understand. So generally, yes, there is rationalism, there is maximization, but human beings, by their nature, by the complexity of their minds and hearts, are not always rational. Sometimes they look rational, very rational, and sometimes not. I want to mention one thing. In Surah Al-Kahf, what is the number of Surah Kahf? 15 or what? Uh, Probably 15, I'm not sure. But anyway, in Surah Al-Kahf, these young men who went to the cave and were made to sleep for 310 years. Now, when they woke up, they gave one of them some of the money that they have, gold money, and not gold, sorry, it was silver money. ورق. It says بورقكم هذا. So ورق means coined silver, not silver by weight, but silver coined. So but the advice they gave him, remember, these are young people. They didn't know that they slept for that long. They thought they slept for half an hour, half a day, or maybe maximum a day. And then they told him, go to the market and get us the best food. أزكى طعاما فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه. So he should check first. فلينظر means that he should check first which is the best of the food. Azka means best, best on every ground. More delicious, more appealing, more seeing it better, of course, more fresh, etc., etc. All these means أزكى طعاما. فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه. So these guys, and by their doing that, was not condemned. In fact, was considered as a good character of them, that they are searching for what is the best. And azka means the best, not only good, but the best. So definitely maximization is a process that is natural and human, and the Sharia does not find it wrong. Maximization is a good motivation and a good process for taking choice, for making decision. Okay? Continue, please. Of course, human being not always maximize. Sometimes they are irrational, and rationality can be caused by many factors. Part of it is information, but not necessarily really. Even with information, they may make irrational decisions that are not caused, not based on their concept of maximization. One thing also need to be mentioned here. I think you mentioned it, Abdul Basit, that
What,
the
sir?
time horizon issue.
Yes.
So tell us about the time horizon. Now, if it is infinity, the solution will be that people will always only select things that relate to life after, and don't do anything about this life. Would that be acceptable, or would that be a solution for a Muslim consumer, that you take only what relates to life after, and you don't spend on this in this dunya, in this life?
No, sir. This dunya is also important. So here necessary spending is compulsory. So by spending here in a good way, the Muslim earns hasanat that affect the time horizon of akhirah as well.
So here, when we put the element that faith in the akhirah, its depth in the hearts of people definitely varies. They are not equal in it. This is one. The fitra, the natural urge for immediate consumption, is also another element which exists in all human beings. There is a need for food, etc., etc. The ordinances in the Quran that do not neglect your worldly life. Yes, you work toward the afterlife, but do not neglect your worldly life. This is repeated all the time in the Quran, in addition to the direct ordering that وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. Use for consumption and do not overspend on it. So all these elements make the solution cannot be really infinity. That then you don't spend anything on this life and only you spend on the life after. That is incorrect. That kind of solution is not tolerated in the consumer theory from Islamic point of view. Although we do consider the afterlife, we do consider the time horizon and the effect of every action we do in this life and in the afterlife. Okay,
Yes, sir. So next
continue,
is
please.
the consumer equilibrium. Three ways to use endowments. So consumption as for savings and B for benevolent. Two steps for consumer equilibrium. So distribution of endowment between C, S, and B. So distribution of each of C and B into different uses. We can understand with this equation. One tells us that the endowment of wealth and income are entirely used in the above three ways. This gives us what we call the endowment constraints, which is shown in figure 1.
Okay,
Okay,
continue.
sir. So this is the mathematical representation of consumer behavior and consumer equilibrium.
And of course, it includes R, the rate of return on investment.
Okay, sir.
Okay, continue, please.
Is there R mentioned in this graph?
It should be mentioned in the equation. Uh, it should be in the equation. R is also an element, the rate of return on, or you can put it here. B
Yes.
is not only a residual but also influenced by R.
Yes, sir. The next is producer theory.
Okay, so you need to introduce these amendments and quickly send them to
Oh,
uh, uh, to me to review them and then to your colleague, but within no more than 2 days, because these are this session 8 is included in the exam.
okay, sir. So there are several issues that are common between conventional and Islamic economics with respect to the producer behavior. For example, earning profit or maximization of the profit. So what are the motives and objectives of producer? To consume or to sell in the market. Other objectives may be family, caring, obedience of Allah, improvement and beautification. So, in contemporary economics, with the legal and economic complexity, what are the motives of production? Corporate, agency, mass production, franchise, and international, etc. So, creating adequate profit or maximum profit.
So what is the difference between adequate profit or maximum profit, especially when you talk within the context of agency, that you have the manager of the corporation, of course, will maximize his own benefit compared with the benefit of the shareholders. So how would that reconciliation be? Would it be maximum profit or adequate profit?
Corporate leaders will try to maximize his profit.
Well, he want to maximize own interest. The corporate leader expected to maximize own interest, but at the same time, to maximize own interest, he has to be good to the shareholders. Otherwise, the shareholders may fire him. So, what is the meaning of maximizing own interest? He want to keep the management, he want to keep his benefits, and at the same time, he want to convince the shareholders to keep him, and of course, give him additional benefit as much as possible.
Okay, sir. Sir, I am also thinking different about adequate profit. I was thinking that in Islam, adequate profit is recommended and on one product, and a producer should not take more profit in one product.
Why not maximizing profit?
Main, he, I
يعني didn't Uthman maximize profit when they were offering him to buy the goods he brought, and they were needed in the society, and he was offered and increased in the offer. And he was continuously telling them, well, no, I got a better offer than that. So they increased the offer once and more and again. And when they finally could not increase anymore because their abilities it doesn't allow them to do that, he told them, well, God gave me better offer than you. I'm going to donate this to the poor and needy, and instead of selling it to you.
Okay,
Right?
sir. Yes. Thank you.
So there's no limit really on maximization, but you have to be with the market. You cannot be away from the market. That's the point. You have to be within the range of the market. Adequate profit is the profit, especially in the theory of agency, is the profit that will convince the owners of the company to keep the manager and increase his own benefits. This is the adequate profit. Need not to be the highest, because notice that the manager wants to take part of the pie too, part of this of the profits in the form of benefit to himself or to the management and top management, whatever it is. So managers always, under the agency theory, we assume that while they work to maximize the profit of the shareholders, but they maximize them to an extent that does not mean reducing their own benefits. So they want to maximize their own benefit through convincing the shareholders that this profit that they are giving to them is good one, is adequate. Yes, yeah, Abdul Nasser. Abdul Nasser, تفضل, you have a question?
Yes. Yeah, I have maximizing the profit very small. So what about in the power market where you don't have to lose the cost? Can you sell the
I
product?
could not hear you well.
يعني in normal markets, can you sell the product with a margin that is more than the principal, the original cost? I mean,
يعني the profit may be more than 100%.
yeah, 100%.
Yes, I mean, it can be. Here is the example. Uthman was offered 300% and 400%. And he refused because he said, well, God is offering me 700%. So I'm going to give it to God, not to you. And yet, suppose he accepted their offer of 300%, 400%, there's no reason why there is no limit. Yani. In fact, in our Sharia, there is no limit. But I have a question I want to ask you all, and want your thought about it. Is profit maximization uh, in violation with the objectives of Sharia or with the moral values of Sharia? Is getting profit several hundred times, several times, multiples. If the market permits it, without doing any mischief, is it uh,
In some
violation of Sharia, or whether maqasid Sharia or the moral values of Sharia?
Sir,
I don't think so. I don't think so. But
I don't think so.
it depends on the customers. I think in the عرف العرف السائد في
There's
المجتمع.
no really, as long as you are honest, but of course, using any either bad approaches or lack of disclosure or anything else, then that is not, it goes into the haram then. That makes it not permissible. So when you talk about normal competition is okay, but throat cutting permission competition is definitely not acceptable, because throat cutting competition means definitely you are using aggressive methods that are not appropriate, like reducing your price even at a cost, because you know the other party cannot afford to reduce his price to take the market, and then you later increase your price. These are behaviors that are not acceptable and not permissible in Sharia. Otherwise, depending on the market, the profit rate can be anything, even several multiple. Yes, Tahira, please go ahead.
Yes, I think there is a limitation. There is a surah in Quran about المطففين الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون.
Yeah, but notice, will mutaffifin do what?
They're playing with
They do immoral things. They do not increase the price. They cheat in the price. إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون, they cheat in quantity. They reduce the quantity when they give, and they increase it when they take unfairly. So this is a form of cheating. المطففين are cheaters. They are not maximizers. I mean, they maximize through cheating, and definitely that is not permissible. الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون. To give يعني sell a kilo and give 900 weight, that is definitely haram. That is تطفيف. Or buy kilo and take 1100 also gram in weight, instead of taking only 1 kilogram. Okay, go ahead, Muhammad.
Yes, Professor, but what about if the market is not fair? I mean, for example, the gap between poor and rich is huge, and the price of commodity in the market can be affordable by rich, but some poor people cannot afford this, especially for needed commodities like flour or oil or bread or this stuff.
Well, the poor needs to be supported from zakah, and if zakah is not sufficient, then from the wealth of the rich beyond zakah. So in other words, if there are poor in the market and they cannot maintain their minimum living, definitely they must be helped from zakah, or if not sufficient, beyond zakah. No one should be left without being able to fulfill the basic needs. So this is the poor obviously does not have a signal in the market, and unless you give him, then he won't have any signal in the market. He won't appear. You don't see it in the market, or you don't see him in the market. So if there is a poor, definitely has to be supported, helped through zakah, and if it is not sufficient, then beyond zakah, until his needs are satisfied. So what is then, what does that have to do with the prices?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, is it not better to facilitate the poor by reducing or reasonable price rather than facilitating with the help of zakat?
Well, what is the meaning, the implication of reducing price, selling at loss?
No,
Why
sir.
should I produce if I'm going to be forced to sell at loss? Why should I produce? I would rather not produce in this case,
Okay, sir.
right? So
Yes,
why
sir.
should I produce if I am going to sell at loss? Uh, of course, can we impose pricing in certain situation? You know that argument. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he thought that the increase in price was natural because there is not enough material in the market, and we are talking about basic materials, in fact, not even يعني things that are only used for beautification. So he said he refused pricing. But ulama say if there is any element on the part of the producers of any form of immorality, then we should impose pricing. It is said by Abu Hanifa even يعني, as early as before the year 150 of Hijrah, that in any case of monopoly practice, then we should impose prices. And he even mentioned a case of service producers monopoly, that if a service of certain kind, the producers of this service, if they agree together and raise their prices, then you price on them, you force them to sell at a lower price. And of course, can you force them to sell at a price below cost? You cannot, because that means they will not produce at all. So you have to leave them a margin of survival without which they cannot really continue production. And to continue production, you need to have profitable production, of course. And without profitable production, you cannot produce. And then what do we do with the poor? يعني this is why, in my opinion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala installed zakah as a permanent practice, as a permanent repeated every year. And this is why also in the Sunnah, we have that idea that no one can be maybe left, no one may be left without fulfilling basic needs for that person. So whatever happened, even if it were that we take from the rich own wealth, not even the zakah, beyond zakah. Yani when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say that 3 times will swear, Wallahi la yu'min, Wallahi la yu'min, Wallahi la yu'min. By God, he is not a believer. By God, he is not a believer. By God, he is not a believer. A person who goes to bed at night with his stomach full, and he has a neighbor who is hungry. So definitely a neighbor who is hungry cannot be left hungry and must have been taken care of from the beginning, that he is not hungry. So leaving a person hungry in the society is definitely wrong and not acceptable at all in the Muslim standards. Meaning that, okay, if there is any mischief, if there is any inappropriate behavior on the part of the producers, then definitely you price on them. and you force them to sell at a lower price. But if there is no misbehavior and the cost is high, let the market determine who among the producers would survive. The one who has high cost would not survive, of course, and will go bankrupt. And it's okay to go bankrupt. What is wrong with it? Because he's not producing in an efficient way, and that definitely improve efficiency in the market. So where is the problem? And I don't see here really any problem in charging any profit, in maximizing profit. And of course, the competition would put tag on this kind of maximization, will force you to be more efficient, will force you to reduce your price uh, to the lowest possible level. And of course, competition will force you also to lower your profit. Okay? Any
Okay, sir.
question? Continue, please.
Producer's objective with respect to Islamic perspective. The general theme of honoring work, manual and intellectual alike, respecting self-sustenance and cherishing production for the satisfaction of one's and one's family needs and for charity is well established in Islamic basic text in Quran and Sunnah. The Quran persistently repeats the idea that humans should rove through the earth, avail themselves of its resources, and extract its God given bounties. Prophet ﷺ glorified working in order to satisfy personal and family requirements and described such work as being an act for the sake of Allah.
So Iman itself urge people to use their abilities to their maximum, not to neglect their abilities. Okay?
Yes. Additionally, production for the purpose of improving the material level of one's living and for accumulation of wealth is mentioned in several places of the Quran as an intrinsic human drive. People are being tempted by the lure of love of women and children, heaped up hoards of gold and silver, horses branded for blood and excellence, and wealth of cattle and well-tilled land, and several other virtues.
Okay.
The objective of better enjoyment and amusement of the worldly life and the objective of accumulation of wealth and riches are neither discarded nor neglected in the economic system of Islam. They are rather recognized and considered as a natural thrust which men and women pursue on their own. Thus, the pursuit of economic progress is not a vice according to Islam. In fact, it becomes one of the virtues if it is balanced and intended for a good cause. Islamic concept of good deed and action includes material, spiritual, and moral matters, and the Islamic concept of wrong deeds is also inclusive of all material, spiritual, and moral issues together. The Quran repeatedly uses the terms good action and bad action in the way which is inclusive of material and non-material aspects. The idea of maximization itself is inherent to the human intuition as well as in the Islamic faith. It is part of human nature, which is the religion of Islam recognizes, nourishes, and affirms. Numerous references are in the Quran and Sunnah to the idea that one should always look for the highest reward at the lowest cost. Maximization applies to all issues, material and spiritual. So, next is separation between management and ownership. So, management can be hired and sharing management. So, what does management maximizes? And agency problem. Makala and its Sharia implication. The Islamic banks are wakil of the customer. So Islamic banks should avoid more risky modes of financing. So there are different forms of organization, proprietor, cooperative, and authoritarian, etc. So these are the some questions relating to the factors of production. So we uh, see in next slides. Is labor the sole source of value? Labor is a source of value but not the only source, since ultimately when labor deals with virgin natural resource, exchange value depends on the natural endowments and consumer desires in addition to the labor.
So, يعني the idea, do we believe like the Karl Marx that labor is the only source of value? Or we also argue that property, capital, ownership is also a source of value? Uh, I believe that the Islamic theory goes on considering both labor and property, and so property is important in creating added value, is not neglected, and it's not only يعني a subordinate factor. It is an equal factor in its importance. Okay,
Okay, sir.
and we will discuss now these rewards on them. I think there is an interesting discussion here. Okay, continue.
Yes, sir. So who is entitled to own the product? There seems to be a complete symmetry between material capital and human capital from the point of view of their respective ways they enter the production processes and their entitlement to earning and ownership of the product. Both labor and capital may contribute to the production either as owner, risk taker, or as seller of own services for a prefixed ujra. They may also cooperate together in becoming owner or risk taker of the project. Entitlement of product ownership is based on ownership of a project, and risk is characteristic of ownership. Accordingly, a venturous labor is a kind of labor that is exposed to risk. This requisite allows it to own the product.
So let's compare the conventional economics here and Islamic economics in matter of the project and the how we deal with the individual project and individual factors of production. Uh, you can hire uh, all factors of production, can we? يعني land can be, first of all, let's see, do we agree with the idea that land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurship are factors of production, and we accept them as factors of production? I find no issue with this, that of course uh, all these are factors of production. The entrepreneur is the person that put factors together. Now, he may be the owner, or he may be hired also. So where does profit go, and where does other returns of production go? Are the fact that the يعني are any or all these factors, can they enter production on a predetermined return, like you hire a laborer for a wage that is determined at the time of hiring? You rent a land for rent for an amount that is determined at the hiring. You also rent a machine for an amount that is at the time of determined also at the time of hiring. Can you also hire the manager the organizer of the project, and give him a paid salary? Yes. So who deserves then the profit, which we may call it as the remainder, and how it is, who owns the profit, the 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 profit? My understanding of Islamic finance is that the one who is entitled to the added value in a project, in the production process, is the one who owns that production process. So who owns it? Let's take two examples. Example number one, take common stock company. In a common stock company, we create a common stock company by founders. Founders have some share in the capital, and then they call for a general assembly after they get the shareholders, and the general assembly, which is the shareholders, takes the decisions and is really the owner of the project, and any residual after they hire the labor, they hire the land, they hire the machine, and they may hire also the entrepreneur. Notice, يعني they may hire the general manager, who is a very industrious person. He is very capable, and we hire him to manage the project. And we give him a determined salary. So now the owner in this case is the provider of the financial capital or accounting capital, right? The owner is not the provider of the economic capital, because the economic capital means the machine. So he may not be the owner in this example of a common stock company. He is not the owner, but the owner is the provider of the financial capital. They buy they make a board of director higher than the general manager. And then they will be the final decision maker in it, the board of director that represents really the financial capital. This will be the owner. Then they hire machines, that is capital in the meaning of in the economic meaning. They hire machine, they hire land, they hire labor, and they hire also the entrepreneur. Okay, so in this example, the owner deserves the profit. And all those that are hired, they are hired at a prefixed return. For the owner, consider it cost. So these prefixed return are cost for the owner. The company may make loss. What is the meaning of making loss? It means they hired these elements and they could not sell the total product for more than the total amount that is predetermined for these elements of production. Okay, so financial capital. Is financial capital a factor of production? It is not, but it represents the ownership of the project, right? The factors of production are the entrepreneur who runs and puts together these elements, and of course the machine which was rented, the labor which was also kind of similar to rented, hired, the land, and also it is hired. So all factors production that contribute to the production are hired by the owner of the financial capital. But what does the financial capital own then? It owns the project. And by virtue of owning this project, they deserve the profit. and all other elements deserve a prefixed, predetermined return of their as a price of their factor. Take another example. A car rental business. In a car rental, you got a person of reputation. He may not have even money. Only a person of reputation in the market of car rental. And then that person would hire cars on his prestige, on his well-known reputation for payment in the future. So he may rent the cars. He may rent also a manager. He may rent, and all these will be paid prefixed, but their payment will be later. So he will pay them at the end of the month, not at the beginning of the production. He will hire the man who will clean the car and fill in the gas and so on, and make the business then of only based on his reputation and his skills of putting these things together. He owns the project, and he started earning before he start paying, and then he pays for all these factors of production, the predetermined, prefixed, pre-contracted return for each one of them. Very often, he may play the role of the entrepreneur because he's putting these two all together. Even a manager, if he appoints a manager, wouldn't accept unless he need to be paid and all that. So he would work as the entrepreneur, and then you have the capital is rented. So he manages the project, but the capital is rented. The labor is rented, the land is rented, and the owner is the entrepreneur. So the owner here is the entrepreneur. In the case of the stock company, common stock company, the owner is not the entrepreneur, is an outsider. In other normal businesses, in all other normal businesses, you always have one of the factors connected with ownership. So the owner of capital, owner of the machine, may hire the other factors of production, including entrepreneur. Owner of the land may hire all other factors, including entrepreneur. The entrepreneur may hire all these other factors also, and he provide his own capital or his own credit that he got, which is equal to capital that he got from the financial institutions. So, in other words, ownership of a project is either taken by a non-factor of production, which provides for all factors of production. Like the example in a common stock company, the owner of the financial capital was the one who was able to hire all four factors of production, and including the entrepreneur, a manager, organizer, a big mind like what's his name, this William Ghusson or Peter Ghusson, whatever, I forgot his first name. Ghusson, who was the head
Carlos
of
Ghusson.
Nissan company. ايش اسمه؟
Carlos Ghusson.
Carlos, yeah, Carlos Ghusson. Okay, and Carlos Ghusson was a hired person, was on salary. Yani salary and other benefits that are predetermined. So this is an entrepreneur that is hired. So all factors of production could be hired, in the example of a person or an entity that takes the final and ultimate decisions, but provides also the capital, the financial capital. And by providing the financial capital, they deserve the profit. The entrepreneur may be also the one who deserves the profit while hiring the other three factors of production. And the owner of any of the other factors of production, usually the labor is not, but if you take it in the Sharia concept, in Mudaraba, for instance, the labor here is a managerial labor, really is entrepreneurial labor, not a labor. Because we mean by labor, the labor that is hired, usually unskilled labor or low caliber labor, not managerial labor. In fiqh, they call it al-sharikul amil. So he's laborer, but not laborer manager. So if you take the entrepreneur then, and let's use it as entrepreneur, the entrepreneur and the provider of financial capital uh, together own the project. The entrepreneur, along with the provider of financial capital, they own the project, and by virtue of owning the project, they deserve the profit, the remainder. They hire capital. They hire also other labor, the non-managerial labor, and they hire the land. But here I have an entrepreneur and provider of financial capital. So the ownership of the project is an essential element in entitlement to the profit of that project. And the ownership could be one of the factors of production, the four factors that we know them, labor, capital, land, and entrepreneurship, or could be none of these. All these are hired, but the owner of the project is the shareholders. This kind of analysis means what? Means that each of the factors of production may enter the production process either as owner and then become risk taker, and then uh, uh, it deserves the profit, but it also bears the losses. The owner of financial capital can take this function as owner of the project and hire all other factors of production. Two factors of production may cooperate together and take that risk, like owner of the land, for instance, along with the entrepreneur, and they can take it together. Like in Muzara'a. In Muzara'a, we have owner of a land and we have the entrepreneur, and they both deserve the added value. They distribute, they can hire, of course, hire other labor, hire machines, tractors, and others, and buy the pesticides and the seeds and fertilizers, etc. But now the ownership of the project is combined by the muzari' and the farmer and the landlord and the owner of the land. And they got the residual by that. So notice then, who deserves the profit? Any of the factors of production? No. Rather, the owner of the project. The owner of the project maybe one of the factors of production, or maybe an outsider, and all four factors of production are hired for predetermined return. And of course, then the owner of the project is the one who will take the profit when the profit arises, the added value, or the liability of the loss if a loss happens, if the added value is negative added value. Okay, can we agree on these? Which is an important change, really, of the conventional theory, recognizing the ownership as the factor that deserves profit, and also as the factor that is the main factor in production, is the one that which may be one of the factors of production, or maybe outside the factors of production, or maybe also a combination of two factors together. In mudaraba, Rabbul Mal and the manager, the entrepreneur, and in farming, the land owner and the in muzara'a and the farmer. Is that a more realistic understanding than the conventional theory that says there is interest for the capital, and there is and the profit goes to the entrepreneur? Isn't that too simplifying to the extent that you become wrong? Because the entrepreneur may not be the owner of the project, maybe also hired, and because capital does not earn interest. Capital in the economic sense means machines that are used, or goods that are used for producing other goods and services. So the machine may enter the process of production on the basis of renting its services also. So the machine will have a rent per machine, like the rent per land. So the idea of the capital earns interest is incorrect completely. Okay, agree on that? How about this kind of analysis in
Yes, sir.
contrast with the conventional analysis that factors of production are for? Is money a factor of production?
No, sir.
Owner of money may own the project and may deserve the profit then, if it hires all the factors of production. So owner of money may own the project, but it is not a factor of production. And definitely interest doesn't appear in the picture at all, because capital may enter the production process either as owner of the project and maybe the one that deserves the profit, or capital may enter, capital even in the economic sense, may be the owner of the project that provides the ownership of the project and that hires the other factors of production. And then it may also be the owner of the financial capital, or may not, then, and also factors of production may cooperate together in owning the project. So what matters for the profit is ownership of that project, of that production process, completely, all of it together, not necessarily ownership of each factor alone. And interest does not appear in it. What is interest then? What is interest? Anybody can answer that? Interest, riba. What is interest? Does it have anything to do with the production process? It's not part of the production process at all. Interest is an increment in a debt, and its prohibition is based on the idea that a debt does not generate any increment. So if you own a debt, where does the increment come from? Interest is not a price of money, and it is not a price of capital either. Okay? Do we agree now on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I think that summarizes all the remaining slides, right?
Yes, I think so.
So we need to recognize this fact, يعني conventional theory wrongly. Where do they include? Where do they brought interest in as a price of capital? يعني even in the Western economies today, capitalist or quasi-socialist in Europe, the owner of capital, of economic capital, does not deserve interest, definitely. And when we talk about the factors of production, we talk about economic capital, not financial capital. So money is not one of the factors of production, but owner of money may own the project and may hire all the four factors of production. But so interest is not price of capital, rather rent per machine is the reward of capital, and interest has nothing to do in it. Interest is an increment in a debt, and in the Western society today, interest is increment in a debt, not a price of money. This is a myth that interest is a price of money. It's an increment in a debt. Only when we convert money into a debt, then we call it price of money. But when we don't convert money in a debt as money as in it is in your pocket, for instance, or in your vault, does it earn interest? It does not. So only it earns when we convert it into a debt. Then interest is not a price of money, it is a price of a debt, and has nothing to do with the process of production. You can get money on debt basis and then hire the four factors of production, right? So that's not it's kind of in my opinion, in my understanding, my theorizing, definitely these are mistakes in the conventional analysis, and mistakes that are really not justified and have no reason why they should fall into these mistakes, except probably the historical tradition of growth in America, especially how growth happened in America, especially where the interest was associated with capital. The theory goes as, or the history rather, goes as follows. Probably I mentioned that to you earlier. And if I did consider this as a repetition, the factors, companies started as individual, personal, or within the family, like Ford Company and other car companies. And car companies were driving the American market for several decades. And they still have a great importance in the American market, though they are no more the drivers. But the car production especially started in all American companies as a family company. One person with his wife and children worked together, and they created these factories. But when they wanted to expand, they had a choice to either expand through issuing, becoming shareholding and issuing shares in the market, or they can issue bonds in the market, that is borrow from the market. Of course, for smaller expansions, they could borrow from institutions, but then they started borrowing from the market, issuing bonds instead of issuing shares. Issuing shares will bring new owners, and they may lose their authority on the project. They want to keep their authority, so it's better for them, in order to buy machine and expand their operation, they issue bonds and they pay on the bonds interest. So they pay interest on the bonds in order to buy a new machine. This is where, in my understanding, the historical association came. But interest is really, even in the Western economy today, it's only a price of debt, not a price of money, and not definitely a price of capital. The price of capital is rent per machine, because capital can enter either on profit taking and of course risk bearing, profit taking return, or on the basis of being hired. This is the economic capital. Capital in the sense, in the economic sense, can be enter the process of production on either of these two ways. So does any other factor of production. Yani, of course, we are not talking about the unskilled and managerial, non-managerial labor, but managerial labor can, which is the entrepreneurship. So exclude labor to whom we pay wages, exclude them, that's okay. But the others, then other three factors can enter the production process on either way, either at a predetermined return or to share into the profit and the liability of the project, that is to become an owner of the project. So this summarizes the whole thing. Yeah, tell us about الأرض البيضاء.
Okay, sir. The barren land not in the ownership of anyone. If anyone makes this land functional, so then it goes in his ownership. But
Okay,
if he does
go
not
ahead.
utilize it consecutively for 3 years, so this returns to previous state as plain land or Ardul Beda.
But notice, this is a land that has never been owned before, not
Okay,
a
sir.
land that was owned, but we don't know its owner. If it was owned and we don't know its owner, then it is يعني it becomes really a property of the state. It goes similar to Kharaj, property of the whole society, and the state can manage it any way it likes. It is not, if it has been owned before. This is the fiqhi position. If it has been owned before, then it is not أرض بيضاء. It is not plain land. Plain land is a land that has not never been owned in the past. So if we go into areas around villages, these are expected definitely to have been owned in the past. They are not أرض بيضاء. If nobody now have a claim on them, then they belong to the state. On behalf of the society, of course. But الأرض البيضاء, when you go now in the Amazon area, for instance, or in the desert of Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Libya, these deserts were not inhabited even before. So there are, this is أرض بيضاء. Whereas the other, if it was owned before, it becomes أرض خراجية, not أرض بيضاء. And أرض خراجية belongs to the whole society, and the government takes control of it. Okay?
Yes, sir. Increment in owned property, entitlement right. The person who owns the property is entitled to the any increase in that property even without his or her effort.
Okay. So that
Meaning of
means property ownership itself gives that entitlement. Okay. Continue,
sir,
please.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, can you give any example that how an increment happens without any effort?
Well, I own a land and the grass came in it by the from the rain. And of
Okay,
course,
sir.
the wind itself would bring grass from one place to another. So grass comes on it. Who owns the grass? The owner of the land.
Okay, sir. The meaning of al-ghanam be al-ghuram, al-kharaj be al-daman. The
Okay.
principle shows a relationship between risk and return as two facets of ownership. That is a link between profit and loss or revenue. Al-ghanam bil ghuram corresponds to liability for bearing loss. Al-kharaj bid daman. The definition
Okay.
of
Continue, please. Yes.
Al-Kharaj bid-daman, the right to derive benefit from a property if one owns it and assumes responsibility for its potential liability.
Okay. So here, يعني two things. One, الغنم بالغرم. This is not a hadith. الخراج بالضمان. This is a hadith. These are the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Both of them make fundamental maxim of Islamic fiqh, especially in fiqh al-muamalat and especially in finance. And both of them have the same meaning. This B that connect the two words, this B is a B of association, not a B of causality. Many people wrongly think that al-ghanm is caused by al-ghurm. It is not caused. Risk cannot create profit by all means. What create increment wealth, what create added value is either property or labor or service or man hours. But added value cannot be created by risk. Risk cannot create added value. It is associated with added value. So this ba is ba of association because both of them are facets of ownership. So what matter is the ownership. Okay, this is very important to have it. And khalas, we don't want to come back to these ideas anymore. But they should be settled because they make a basic fundamental background on which we base many other arguments. So ownership is what deserves the added value, not the risk.
We have discussed this is capital a factor of production.
Yeah, we discussed this. Khalas, go on. More. Take more.
Is money a factor of production?
Yeah. Money, owner of money can own the project, but it's not a factor of production. And definitely interest is not a price of money. Interest is a price of debt.
So a rent and wage represent the share of labor and land in the value added, whereas profit is the share of owner, venturous party.
Ghalla is the output of agriculture.
Okay, sir. So basic assumptions. Profit is not the only factor that moves a Muslim producer. Besides profit, there are other factors that include care for the material and spiritual welfare of other people, beautification and improvement of the environment, promotion of virtues and spiritual values, reconstruction and reformation of earth, that includes increasing output as an aim in itself. These other objectives do not necessarily compete with the profit making, although a producer may sometimes be faced with the choice between profit maximization and some of these factors.
And
So
they may
second,
choose either of them. But in fact, yes, humanly, people do not produce only for profit. All human beings, and that applies on Muslims and non-Muslims all the way. Uh, okay, continue, please.
okay, sir. So second assumption is prohibition of interest. While capital participates in production either as hired machines or on the basis of sharing the profit, which the entrepreneur introduces some refinement in the cost equation for the firm. The rewards of capital and entrepreneurship can be either a fixed and elements of a cost or a distribution of residual, that is the algebraic profit. Separation of management from ownership, yeah, that we have discussed, sir.
Mhm.
So I
Okay, خلاص, I think that that's all. Any question? Please go ahead, Tahira.
Yes, about the human.
Can you raise your voice, please?
Yes, the point about the human not only produced to seek a profit. Uh, um, this is a new argument these days, even in the contemporary economics, between the group arguing that we are produced to seeking the benefit of the stakeholders or shareholders.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, yeah, continue. Go ahead.
I think Islam reached this point that we should not only produce to the benefit of shareholders only, but there is stakeholders. Stakeholders include the benefit of the society. I think there's a lot of theories we studied before. Islam reached points in these theories before, a long time ago, 14 centuries before. There's another theory I'm always talking with my children about it. Even in science, they teach them there is a living and non-living things. Non-living things like wood and rocket, they cannot talk, they don't feel. Uh, this uh, this is a theory we taught before, and our children these days and taking the same theory. But I told them in Islam, the rock and the wood can talk and they can feel. And there is an incident that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, جذع الشجرة أو المنبر, the Sahaba hear a voice from the جذع الشجرة يعني يلحن إليه. Even the stones يعني. Now the science يعني there's a discovery that these rockets and what we call it non-living things, there is a movement inside them, or it looks like some kind of life in these non-living things.
And I wouldn't like to argue that. It's not my area. I don't know any, about it, and I wouldn't really like to. I don't have a word on it. But when we talk about economics, that there is always social responsibility for any person in the economy, whether corporation or natural person or anyone. There is, yes, definitely social responsibility that everybody considers in own decision making, and it varies definitely. The depth of the feeling of the social responsibilities varies from one person to another. يعني in Islam, definitely the social responsibility in the Islamic system is a kind of clearly higher. And considering in your own decisions, considering other persons around you is an important thing. And this is, for instance, a rich person who can afford enjoying many things may abstain from buying such things because his neighbors don't have that, because his neighbors are not as rich as he is, and then he doesn't want to show them that he's enjoying things better than them. That is, yes, a part of the social responsibility, and it affects individual decision. But uh, what I know about the Islamic economic system, that these issues have two levels. Level which is always encouraged, and it goes through preaching and through abilities of people to raise their faith into higher levels. And these higher levels then will definitely affect their behavior and their feeling of responsibilities toward others. This is always encouraged, to raise that feeling all the time. And the Quran repeatedly talks about it. This is why I understand perhaps why the Quran talks more about charity, about sadaqah, than it talks about zakah, for instance. That this feeling toward others should be encouraged always, and this is part of the spirit of the Islamic economics. Yet the other level is a minimum level. Below it, you are not Muslim. Below it, it cannot be an Islamic economic system. That is the guaranteeing the minimum level of living for everybody. That guarantee comes essentially through zakah, but even if zakah is not sufficient, we have to add to it. We have to charge the rich additional duty to sustain these sustain the minimum level. So these two levels, one level is encouraged, is not really dictated, but encouraged and highly encouraged, and you will see many examples of it in the Muslim economy and Muslim society. But the other level is an indispensable one, without which the society cannot be an Islamic one. So we need to, that distinction, in my opinion, is important also, understanding these two levels. Yes, when we discuss